52% of workers reported burnout in 2021, the highest number ever recorded. But the ancient Hermetic texts called this crash 2,000 years before your calendar app existed. And they didn't just predict it, they gave you the equation. The text is called the Kybalion, published 1908, tracing principles directly from the Corpus Hermeticum. It describes a universal law, not a metaphor, a law with math behind it that nobody in hustle culture ever bothered to read. The World Health Organization added burnout to its official disease classification in 2019 for the first time in history. Not stress, not fatigue, burnout, as a diagnosable medical event. 52%, more than half the workforce. That number jumped 9 points in a single year. This is not a trend. This is a system behaving exactly as it must. In Japan, they have a specific word for this, karoshi, death from overwork, formally recognized in 1969. 10,000 deaths per year by conservative estimates. The pendulum doesn't negotiate. Stanford confirmed this in hard data. At 55 hours a week, your additional output becomes statistically zero. You are working for free while paying a biological debt you haven't been invoiced for yet. There's a strange footnote in sleep research worth noting here. A scientist named Nathaniel Kleitman, the man who discovered REM sleep, found that the human brain runs on a 90-minute cycle of alertness and downshift. Your body does this automatically, whether you want to or not. Here is what nobody tells you when you download your 4th productivity app. The crash you've been feeling isn't because you're weak, it's because you've been fighting a universal law, and the law does not lose. In 1908, the Kybalion codified 7 Hermetic principles tracing back to the Corpus Hermeticum, written in the 1st and 2nd centuries. Principle 7. The principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. This isn't philosophy. A pendulum swing is governed by physics. The law of conservation of energy makes this non-negotiable. Every degree of arc to the right converts to potential energy that must swing back left. The math was always there. The pyramid texts from 2375 BCE, the oldest religious writings on Earth, describe Ra entering the duat each night, not dying, charging. The return swing written in stone 4,000 years before Silicon Valley told you to hustle harder. The Vedic tradition called it pralaya and manvantara, cosmic periods of activity and dissolution. Not optional phases, but the engine of existence itself. Every major ancient wisdom tradition agreed on this. Every single one. If you watched our earlier video on the principle of polarity, you already know that opposites are the same thing at different degrees. Rhythm is just polarity moving through time. The pendulum doesn't create 2 states. It reveals that they were always one. Your Sunday scaries? That's not anxiety. That's the pendulum's return. You swung hard all week. Physics is just settling the invoice. The Emerald Tablet says it plainly. As above, so below. The pendulum doesn't just govern your work week, it governs planets, tides, civilizations. The macrocosm and microcosm run the same equation. Isaac Newton personally translated the Emerald Tablet into Latin. His handwritten manuscript is still at King's College, Cambridge. The man who formalized gravity studied Hermes Trismegistus. Coincidence or clue? Egypt, Greece, India, the Islamic Golden Age, the Renaissance, 5 separate civilizations, 0 communication, all described the same oscillating law. At some point, you have to stop calling that coincidence. Here is the question that splits every serious Hermetic reader. The Kybalion says there is a technique to neutralize the pendulum's return. Is that technique genuinely available to any practitioner with discipline, or is it so demanding it functions as theory rather than tool? I'm not resolving that here. You tell me. The Kybalion doesn't leave you swinging. It says the practitioner can rise to a higher plane of mental activity, using the law consciously rather than being used by it. That phrase has been misread for over a century. We'll decode it properly. Aristotle wrote in 350 BCE that virtue is the mean between excess and deficiency. Excess destroys, deficiency destroys. The mean is not the midpoint, it's the mastery of the rhythm between them. Hustle culture isn't a philosophy, it's a systematic misunderstanding of energy, treating a pendulum like a straight line and then acting surprised when the wall arrives. The wall was always coming. That's the equation. Sports science calls this overtraining syndrome. Push past the recovery ratio and you don't plateau, you regress below your starting point. Elite athletes figured out the Hermetic principle without reading a single ancient text. Your body enforces the law regardless of your ideology. Push the stress response long enough and the HPA axis inverts. The cortisol system designed to fuel performance starts blocking it. Your weapon turns against you. The pendulum. Again, this is the equation the hustle gurus never show you. The size of the crash is not random, it is proportional to the size of the push. You don't beat the law, you prepay it. So the solution seems obvious, right? Structure your work in rhythmic cycles. 90-minute work blocks, deliberate recovery intervals, Pomodoro-style scheduling. Match the biology, honor the pendulum. Problem solved. Many of history's highest performers already knew this intuitively. Work intensely, recover deliberately. Athletes, composers, great writers, they structured their days like the pendulum they were. Except there's a variable the scheduling systems ignore entirely. 90-minute blocks fix your calendar. They do nothing about the belief that says resting makes you a loser. That belief isn't a scheduling problem, and it's the one that actually pulls the pendulum. Before the answer, there is a cost. To apply this principle, you must release a specific belief. The belief that your worth is your output, that every hour not producing is an hour wasted, that rest is the enemy of success rather than its engine. That identity, the hustle culture built for you, is what keeps the pendulum swinging beyond your control. You cannot schedule your way out of a belief you won't examine. Remember that footnote, Nathaniel Kleitman's 90-minute brain cycle. Here's what I didn't tell you then. Kleitman was describing the same law. The principle of rhythm isn't a philosophy the ancients invented. Your body is already living this law. Every 90 minutes, whether you give it permission or not, your nervous system executes a pendulum return. The ancient text was not prescribing a practice, it was describing a physical reality that was already happening inside you. The hustle culture practitioner isn't fighting a philosophy, they are fighting their own cells. The pyramid texts in 2375 BCE, the Kybalion in 1908, Kleitman's Brack research in 1963, 3 separate discoveries, 0 collaboration, 4,338 years apart, 1 law. We said at the start that the ancient texts had the equation. Here it is. The crash is not a random event. It is the mathematical return on every unit of kinetic energy you put into the forward swing. It was always going to come. The ancient Egyptians understood something your productivity app does not. When Ra descends into the duat each night, he is not dying, charging. The darkness is not the absence of the sun, it is the preparation of the sun. The rest phase is not empty time, it is the most productive time there is. Book of the Dead, Chapter 17. Osiris is not a god of death. He is the god of the cycle. Destruction and restoration are not opposites. They are consecutive phases of the same process. You know that feeling when you tell yourself, "I've been lazy lately"? You look at the last few days, see rest instead of output, and call it failure. The ancient law says you have been reading the data backwards. What you were calling laziness is what Ra does every single night before he rises. You are not falling behind. You are charging. Sports science calls this supercompensation. Performance dips below baseline during recovery, then rises above it. The rest period is where the improvement is built. The duat is not a setback. It is the mechanism of the rise. Darwin walked every day. Newton took years away from mathematics. The rest periods of history's greatest minds weren't interruptions. They were the pendulum charging for its return. 4 steps. That's all this takes. The Kybalion gives you the law, but it also gives you the method. Let's actually use the ancient instruction. Step 1. Audit the swing. Look at the last 4 weeks. Count your high output days against genuine recovery days. If the ratio is more than 3-to-1 in favor of pushing, the return swing is not coming. It is already here. You are just refusing to read it. Step 2. Calculate the debt. Multiply swing intensity by duration and divide by actual recovery. Whatever that number is, that is what the pendulum owes you on the return. You can plan for it, or you can be surprised by it. Step 3. Design the rhythm rather than fight it. Build your week as a wave, not a flat line of identical output. 3 high-intensity days, 1 integration day, deliberate variation. Within each day, honor the 90-minute BRAC, not because someone told you to, but because it's already running. Kant worked from 5 a.m., lectured until noon, walked at 3:30 p.m. without exception. Darwin worked 90-minute blocks with mandatory rest walks. Beethoven, intense morning composition, 2 daily walks. They weren't lazy, they were hermetic without knowing it. Here's the question that splits practitioners. Is applying this principle fundamentally a scheduling problem? Design the calendar right and you're done? Or is the calendar useless until you've changed your state of being, until rest genuinely feels as valuable as output? 2 completely different practices. Which one is it? I'm genuinely asking. Step 4 is the one nobody teaches. The Kybalion calls it rising to a higher plane, and every New Age reader has misunderstood it as think positive. It means this: stop identifying with the swing entirely. Observe it, design for it, use it, but do not become it. In practice, when the recovery phase comes, don't fight it with guilt and don't celebrate it with indulgence. Observe the arc, note the magnitude, charge deliberately, and prepare the forward swing with intention rather than desperation. Reflectively, the oldest question this channel returns to and never fully answers is this: can you actually live these principles, or do you only ever understand them? Knowing the principle of rhythm and embodying it are separated by a gulf that may be the actual work of a lifetime. I don't know where you are in that arc. I'm not sure where I am either. Here's the final theory. The burnout crisis isn't a modern problem. It is an ancient law operating in a culture that decided laws don't apply to it. The equation was never broken, it was just ignored. And an ignored law does not stop functioning. It just sends you the invoice without a warning. There's a question I am not going to answer for you today. The principle of rhythm doesn't only govern individuals. The Kybalion says it governs everything, including civilizations. If the measure of the swing to the right equals the measure of the swing to the left, where exactly on the arc does a civilization that has maximized output at the expense of every other value believe it currently sits? Stepping off the burnout pendulum is step 1, but if you are still trying to force good vibes 24/7, you are going to drain your kinetic energy. Click the video on the screen right now to escape the illusion of toxic positivity.